You're watching National Streaming Sports. Over 20 podcasts, 70 shows, and a 3.5-star rating on Roku TV. Check out nessp.info for direct links and deals on the site Bet Us for 125% off your first three deposits in NFL and college odds for upcoming games, Major League Baseball and NBA futures, and boxing wagers. Also, check out Fanatics, sportswear for your favorite teams, and also network merchandise, retro, Northeast Streaming Sports, National Streaming Sports, Big Football, and the Mac and Jack Sports Show t-shirts. Coffee mugs are coming soon. How we doing today, folks? It's Saturday, and that means it's the Sports Memory Show with Mac, Jack, and James to the show. And today we have an outstanding show for you folks. We got James bringing you the 1969 Miracle Mets and Tom Seaver. Jack with one of the greatest heavyweight champions of all time, Muhammad Ali. And if I got time, I'll squeeze in the 1970 Raiders with head coach, not broadcaster, not video game, but the head coach of the Raiders, John Madden. So, James, I'm going to let you have the floor first as you talk about an incredible season that the Mets had, I think, in their 8th year as a baseball team.
Thank you, sir. So, many great things in history have happened, and I love, particularly American history. But a few things, I think, particularly in one particular year in 1969 happened. And these are some great things. I'm going to mention them to you. And just to remind everybody of some of the things that have happened. In 1969, you mentioned it already, John Madden becomes the head coach of the Oakland Raiders. And obviously he goes on to win the Super Bowl in the 70s. Neil Armstrong becomes the first man to walk on the moon in 1969. The world's first aeroplane, the Boeing 747, makes its first flight from New York to London. And the Jets win Super Bowl III in 1969. Yeah. But none greater, I think, what I just found out than the Mets. 8 years from 1962, a new franchise in the Major League Baseball. Terrible seasons between 1962 all the way up to 1968, become World Series champions in 1969, and an improbable season. I mean, wonderful miracle season. That's why they call them the Miracle Mets. And I think going up against a juggernaut like the Baltimore Orioles would seem improbable, but they end up winning. Let's get started and talk about how they started here. Again, going back all the way back to 1962, up to all the way through 1968, the Jets finished no better than ninth in baseball in the NL division. Excuse me, in the NL conference. But baseball decided to add. Excuse me. Baseball decided to add divisions to each conference. And also not just that, they added 4 expansion teams and 2 on each side. And so nothing was expected of the Mets. Nothing, because of such a poor history that they had. Nothing was expected. They weren't expected to win. They again, like I said, they never finished better than ninth. But their first game out, they played the Montreal Expos, and they had a very close game between 11 and 10. So nothing was really expected of them, but they continued to win some games here and lose some games. And they ended up 18 and 18, which is their best start thus far. They had never had a 500 start like that ever this early on. And throughout the season, they would continue to win. They would couple wins here and there, and excuse me, just have let me clear my throat a little bit. They would continue to win, but they ended up, by the time they got to August, they ended up third. They were third behind the Cubs. The Cubs were leading the division, the NL East, up to that point. And then for whatever reason, the Cubs just seemed to dismantle their whole season at that point. And then as they descended, the Mets ascended and won 38 of 49 games from that point. And they will go on to clinch the division and then go to the NLCS and play the Atlanta Braves. And they swept them. It wasn't even close. Hank Aaron had 3 home runs during that time, but they had great play. And throughout that time, they had great chemistry between their players, because none of the players really were great offensively. But Tom Seaver was a great pitcher during that time. And up to that point, he had won 25 games. He won 25 games, and 9 of those games were complete games for him. And so he was just a pretty dominant pitcher during that time, dominant enough to get his first Cy Young award. And they ended up going to the World Series, one thing I have to say, I learned that this is the first year that the NLCS and the ALCS had occurred. But up to that point, the top 10 teams of the teams of each conference, the top team would go to the World Series. So that surprised me, and I thought that would be kind of unfair for any other team that might have a chance. But this was pretty impressive to see them go ahead and win the NLCS and then go to the World Series. When they got to the World Series, they went up against a juggernaut in the Baltimore Orioles. The Orioles had already won the World Series in '66, and they were looking to be the favorites in '69 to win again. But man, let me tell you, when I watched some of these games that occurred with them, I was just extremely impressed with just the chemistry of these teams. Because you got names like Cleon Jones, Don Clendenon.
Clendenon, yeah, who they got during the season in the trade from the Pirates. He wasn't with the Mets at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, thank you. And also Don Swoboda.
Ron Swoboda, yeah.
Ron, you said, what is it?
Ron Swoboda, yeah.
Ron Swoboda, yes, I'm sorry, yes. And let me see. There was a few other players. Tommy Agee, which they got from the White Sox, which I think helped them greatly, because defensively he was already a former Golden Glove, and he hadn't won one again since in '66. But man, let me tell you, in Game 3, even though they lost the first game, they came back and won the second game. And man, and like we talked earlier, Tom Seaver was able to close that game out. He played pretty strong. But man, when they got to Game 3, it looked like they were like they were just dominant. They won 5-0, and the defense. When I saw Tommy Agee catch those 2 impressive catches, man. One from the center field going to the left, and he's going against the wall, and he catches the ball. And then it was Gary Gentry that had played up to that point, but he walked 3 players and loaded the bases and brought up Paul Blair, and the Gil Hodges came up and took him out of the game and put in Nolan Ryan, and Nolan Ryan gave him 2 strikes, and then Paul Blair hit the ball, but then here comes Tommy Agee, man, he diving catch and took him out. It was just impressive to see. And then every time it seemed like that the Orioles would try to make a momentum shift, they would just snuff it, and they would just and win the games. Am I echoing here?
Yeah, that's Jack's mic. Hold on. Go ahead.
Yeah. they would definitely snuff that momentum and come back and win those games. And then ultimately, they went to game 4, and Ron Swoboda was able to make an outstanding catch as well. Man, he was wow. It was just impressive. That's probably one of the things he's greatly noted for, is making that great catch. But then in game 5, Baltimore tried to make a comeback. They started out the game going 3-0, but then but then the Mets just annihilated them and got 5, and they ended up winning the World Series. And man, it's just impressive to me to see that of all the players that were with the Mets, only a few were Hall of Famers. We're talking about Tom Seaver, Nolan Ryan, who wasn't with them long, and then the manager, Gil Hodges, eventually became a Hall of Famer as well. And of course, they had I can't think of the guy for the New York Yankees that was there. Yeah, exactly. Yogi Berra was there as well as one of the coaches. So it was overall, it was just impressive to see that how they became the Amazing Mets, which was coined by Casey Stengel long when they first started, but then it became the Amazing Mets and the Miracle Mets. And I was just really impressed overall with it. I'm pretty sure you guys probably have a lot of things to say. You have a lot of greater knowledge about this more than me, so I'd like to hear it as well. But it was great to see that.
Yeah, I was at actually game 3 of the World Series. Tommy Agee also hit a home run in that game as well. And 2 fantastic catches, one of them backhanded, running to left field, the other diving catch in right field. On the second great catch, I was sitting all the way upstairs. I played hooky from school, and I was just watching the ball. I had tunnel vision on the ball. So when Agee made the catch, to me, he came out of nowhere because I wasn't following Agee. Normally, you always see the fielder and you see him running towards the ball. But for some crazy reason, I was focused on the ball and nothing else. So that made that catch even, more sensational. And you're right, during that game, Gentry had some control problems. They brought in a middle reliever named Nolan Ryan. Imagine that. He wasn't good enough to start, but he threw real hard. So, and later, of course, we know what became of Nolan Ryan, the type of pitcher he was. But at the time, a middle reliever. And the Mets had all this chemistry. It's easy to forget. The Baltimore Orioles won 108 games during the regular season compared to 100 for the Mets. So the Orioles were a dominant team, but their road to the World Series, even though they won 3 straight, it was best 3 out of 5 against the Twins. They only dominated the last game that they swept. The first 2 games against Billy Martin's Twins, the Orioles won in extra innings. Even though they won 3-0, 2 of the games were really close. And on paper, you look at the Orioles team, their great pitching staff, their starting staff, Jim Palmer, Mike Cuellar, Dave McNally, Pat Dobson. And then you look at Frank Robinson, Boog Powell, Brooks Robinson, Mark Belanger, Paul Blair, Andy Etchebarren. They were like loaded, that team, basically on paper. And even the Met owner, Joan Payson didn't think a team was going to win. When they lost the first game, she spoke to the sports writer, Dick Younger. You think we're going to win 1 game, in this series. But then in game 2, the Mets won 2-1. Jerry Koosman was taken out, I think, with 2 outs in the 9th inning. And Ron Taylor got the save. And then game 3, where we talked about, even though it's 5-0, Agee's 2 catches. If he didn't make those catches, who knows, how the game would have exactly wound up. And what was interesting, game 4, Tom Seaver didn't get the win. He pitched 9 strong innings. The Mets won in 10 innings. It ended controversially. That catcher, oh boy, that backup catcher to Brody Mack. Maybe you remember the name, JC, whatever. I forgot. The last name escapes me for a moment with an M. But he was running inside the baseline, and the throw hit him in the back.
Yeah, I remember.
Technically speaking, The umpire should have called interference and
Yep.
called him out.
That's right.
But the ball hit him in the back, ricocheted to the outfield, and the winning run scored. And the umpire said, well, he didn't do it on purpose. So they didn't call interference on the run. Okay, he didn't do it on purpose, but the point is the baselines are there for a reason. You have to adhere to them. And if you run inside the baseline and the ball hits you in the back, I mean, what's the guy throwing the ball supposed to do? To lob it over your head? I mean, come on. So the Mets got lucky on that. And then as you mentioned, James, even get the final game, Game 5, where they came back from a 3-0 deficit. Yeah, all these guys stepped up, unknown heroes. Al Weiss, their backup second baseman, they platooned a lot, the Mets, that year. He had no power at all, yet he had a 2-run homer to get him back in the game. Don Clendenin, hit 3 homers in the series, and he was named eventually MVP of the World Series. But think of this, guys. Jerry Koosman won both games he started, pitched really well. And in this day and age, the starting pitcher who wins 2 games is going to get it over a guy who hits 3 homers on the series. So that just shows you the mentality of the day, how we valued home runs even over a strong start by a pitcher.
Yeah, all great points. And forgot to be mentioned, director of player personnel was Whitey Herzog. So
I didn't remember that.
There's another guy that did go to Hall of Fame and was an unbelievable manager.
Right.
Tom Seaver, if you look at that year alone, and we're talking ERAs here, okay? Tom Seaver goes 25-7 with a 2.21 ERA. Koosman goes 17-9 with a 2.28 ERA. Long relief, Nolan Ryan goes 6-3. Relief pitchers, Ron Taylor 9-4 with 13 saves, a 2.72 ERA. You also had Carl Kuntz, who pitched, went 6-3 with seven saves. Tug McGraw 8-3 with 12 saves, a 2.24 ERA. This pitching staff, and we talked about it before the show. I mean, there are great pitching staffs in history, right? The Braves come to mind. I mean, there's a couple other teams. But for a young club, now Tug McGraw became a great starting pitcher. Nolan Ryan becomes a great starting pitcher. These guys were in their beginnings, and the Mets had all these guys. And nobody knew these guys. And they are what made the Met team great, especially as they went down the end here and won the as you said, the pennant and the World Series. And as Jack said, all of a sudden these players that really don't hit home runs or don't have great years, they're good ball players. I mean, they're playing. All of a sudden they come to the top, and that's what you need to win a World Series when you go up against a dominating team like the Baltimore. And make no doubt, Baltimore from the late 60s and early 70s, that was a dominating ball club. I mean, they were around first place all the time and making the playoffs they were a great ball club. Jack.
Well, Matt, let me cut in. The evidence to what you're saying. Okay, James mentioned they won the World Series in 66. They didn't go in 67 to 68. They didn't make the playoffs. But 69, when they lost out to the Mets, the next year, 1970, they beat the Cincinnati Reds in 5 games to win the World Series. In the 1971, they lost in 7 to the Pirates in the World Series, a series they should have won. They kind of let it get away. But the idea that they were back the next 2 years in the series, showed the type of team, that they had. You know what the Mets did? The 69 Mets did a lot of platooning.
Yes.
Okay. I think Jerry Grody platooned a little with JC. Oh man, this is not Martinez, Martin maybe. And at first base, Don Clendenin platooned with Eddie Kranepool. And Don Clendenin, who was MVP of the series, he actually sat out the 3rd game. The game the Mets won 5-0. And Eddie Kranepool hits a home run in that game to show you how everything is working. Yep. Kenny Boswell platooned with Al Weiss at second base. Bud Harrelson held down the position full-time at shortstop. But at third base was Wayne Garrett and Ed Charles platooned. In right field, Art Shamsky, Ron Swoboda platooned. But Tommy Agee and Senton, Cleon Jones and left, they were like full timers.
Yeah. And listen, Tom Seaver, I mean, 20 seasons, over 3,000 strikeouts. I mean, the guy, listen, 311 wins, 205 losses, ERA 286, strikeouts, as I said, 3,642, the highest percentage of votes at the time to get into the Hall of Fame, 3 times NL strikeout leader, 70, 71, 73, 75, 76. Hank Aaron actually says to him as he goes to get Hank Aaron's autograph at one of the All-Star games, he says, "I don't know if you know who I am." Hank Aaron says, "Sir, I know who you are, and so will everybody in this stadium." And this, of course, it was in New York before your career is through. I mean, listen, 10-inning complete game in Game 4, as Jack said, and he
I don't think he pitched. No, Seaver didn't have a complete. No, Seaver wasn't at the end. He was taken out. I don't think he pitched the whole. I don't think he got the win in Game 4.
Well, that's what I got, Jack. He wanted to be traded because of a baseball writer, Donald Grant, who was all over Seaver. He wrote a lot of articles.
Dick Young. Donald Grant was one of the owners, the GM.
You're 100% right. You're 100% right. Anyway, Young, as you said, brought up his wife at the end. One of his articles, Seaver demanded to be traded, and he ends up going and continuing having great success. He does go back to the Mets for 1 year. He plays in Boston during the World Series. He doesn't play. He's injured, so he can't play versus his old team in the World Series. Roger Clemens said, "Listen, I was a thrower till I met Tom Seaver, and he taught me how to pitch." One of the greatest pitchers of all time, easily Tom Seaver. So, Jack, we got a great spot here. Now, Jack is now, for anybody who's joining us new, Jack Hirsch, if you don't know who he is, you don't know boxing. Jack Hirsch is one of the foremost experts in boxing, a national. He's not only a Hall of Fame inductee into New York State Hall of Fame. He ran the Boxing Writers Association for years. This dude is incredible. I love having him as my co-host and speaking here, and he's going to tell us about the great Muhammad Ali.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the kind words, Mac. But when it comes to Muhammad Ali, I'll talk about him, but it's hard to find something new about Muhammad Ali that hasn't been said before.
I agree.
I mean, but I'll start from the beginning. Came from a middle-class family in Louisville, Kentucky. His father was a house painter. Ali was subject to his good share of racial discrimination as well, but he didn't grow up in poverty. Nothing the way Joe Frazier did, some of his other opponents. So Ali, what happened? His bicycle was stolen. He went into when he was 12 years old. Went into the police precinct, complained he was going to beat up the person who stole his bicycle. And the police officer there by the name of Joe Martin was a boxing coach as well. He said, "Well, how are you going to beat him up? Do you know how to fight?" And before you know it, Ali and his brother Rudy went to the gym, his younger brother Rudy there in Louisville. And it's something he did very well. And at the age of 18, he went to the Olympics, the Rome Olympics, 1960, represented the United States, won a gold medal. Is a really happy-go-lucky person, like a real jokester, liked to have a lot of fun. And then he was influenced when he went to a wrestling match by this wrestler, Gorgeous George, who'd say, "I am the greatest, I'm this, I'm that." And Ali didn't talk to Gorgeous George, and Gorgeous George told him, "The way you make the crowd hate you, you do this, you do that." And the crowd, and that's how you become a big attraction. So Ali started talking how pretty he was. He took it from Gorgeous George and would go on and on and on and have a lot of fun with it. But he could kind of deliver in the ring, and he got his big opportunity then to fight for the heavyweight championship in 1964 against Sonny Liston in Miami Beach, a place where Ali trained, by the way, at the Fifth Street Gym in Miami Beach. And Liston was considered one of the biggest favorites in sports history at the time, which is hard to believe. Imagine that Ali's one of the biggest underdogs ever. in sports, but the two lead-up fights to that influenced people because Ali struggled in his two victories prior to that. He won a close decision over Doug Jones in Madison Square Garden, legitimate but close. And then in the fight before that against Henry Cooper, he got knocked down heavily at the end of the fourth round, really hurt. Fortunately for him, the bell rang. There was a tiny split in Ali's glove, and as myth has it over the years, it took minutes to replace the glove, and this and this and this, and it turned out to be a complete myth because when you look at tapes of the fight in between rounds, the round was only delayed about 3 or 4 seconds. That's all, so it was inconsequential. And Ali upsets Liston. He was brilliant. Liston quits in his corner at the end of the 6th round. Liston was considered invincible because he knocked out Floyd Patterson in 1 round, the 2 fights in a row. So a lot of people thought it was a fix. How could Liston quit in his corner at the end of the 6th round? Liston claimed he had a separated shoulder. It was more that Liston was discouraged, from chasing Ali around, getting beat up. And then Liston probably figured at a certain point, I just can't beat this guy. I'm packing it up for the day. They had a rematch. Ali stopped Liston in 1 round. A lot of people felt it was a fix. It wasn't legitimate. Replays did show that the punch landed. But you'll get a lot of people debating it. I think it was all legitimate, but, everyone could have their own opinion.
Let me stop you here, Jack. And how you doing, Paul from IUP? Glad that you came aboard. Okay, so he stops in the 7th round. There was 8-1. I think Ali was 8-1 for at least an 8-1 underdog at that time. And we do know that Sonny Liston, who actually said this before committees, was involved in the mob at the time. He rode around with the mob. Ali is an 8-1 underdog at the least. He also said that they did take dives to get different shots, to get different fights. So did the middleweight that Bull Durham. I'm getting the brain freeze here really quick, Jack. Bull Durham. Come on. What's his name?
Bull Durham. What are we going to?
I don't know. I'm going to baseball.
Jake LaMotta, you mean?
Jake LaMotta also said that the mob, you had to throw fights to get title shots at the time. That's the way it was. So if it's 8-1 odds that Ali is underdog, somebody would make a lot of money betting that underdog, wouldn't they? And if Sonny Liston is just sitting there because he feels that he can't catch Ali, which sounds crazy to me. I mean, Sonny Liston had a shot. He had power. He could have knocked out Ali if he caught him right and with 1 punch. That's how strong this guy was. And a pretty good boxer, and he had a pretty good chin. In fact, considered maybe still today, maybe a top 10, top 20 heavyweight of all time. So you don't think that there was something involved, or there could have been, let's say there was, but there was some kind of things happening behind the scenes with the mafia back then.
No, not in the slightest there. I mean, everyone's always going to make up excuses, suspicion, conspiracy theories, no matter what. I mean, we're going to hear this year's World Series. Some people are going to mumble that the game was fixed. The Super Bowl, some people are going to mumble the game was fixed. I mean, you're going to hear that all the time. In the 5th round of that fight, Ali was in big trouble against Liston because Liston had some liniment or something put on his gloves. And it caused a burning sensation in Ali's eyes. So when Ali went back to his corner at the end of the 4th round, he was like blinded. His eyes were burning. And he told his trainer, Angelo Dundee, cut the gloves off. I can't see. I'll tell everyone it's foul play. Imagine if Angelo Dundee listened to Ali and he'd taken his gloves off and waved the fight's over. It would have been, think of how Ali's career would have turned out. Yeah. Whether it was an accident, the burning sensation put on Liston's gloves to kind of blind Ali, or it was just solution put on from a cut. I mean, we're never going to know. It's a real mystery.
That's a great
But Ali
point.
was in trouble during that fight and asked for the gloves to be taken off.
Great
I mean,
point.
that's for real.
Fight number 2. I mean, you've seen the film with Sonny Liston. Would you say Sonny Liston had a good chin?
Yeah, of course, throughout his career.
So the Phantom Punch, if it goes out of slow motion, you see he did catch him with a right. He did catch him with a right on the chin. Do you think that is enough? Now, Sonny Liston goes down for 20 seconds, Jack. He stays down. And of course, at the time, I think it was, is it Jersey Joe Walcott was the referee, right?
Yeah.
And he was going to let it continue. The timekeeper says, hey, listen, the fight's over. It's been more than 10 seconds. And Ali is standing over the top of Sonny Liston, yelling something at him. And some people said he was yelling at him to get up because he was afraid that this would seem like a fixed fight. So this is what some people say. I don't know, true or not. I wasn't there. So again, here's a conspiracy theory that really Sonny Liston just took the dive. Is that possible?
It's possible, but what had happened after Liston lost the title to Ali, the first fight, he got into magnificent condition for the rematch. Really, really trained hard. And 3 days before the fight, Ali had an emergency hernia operation. And Liston could never get his edge back when it was rescheduled. Just never seemed to be the same. And you make a good point when Ali knocked Liston down. Actually, it wasn't the timekeeper who told referee Jersey Joe Walcott it was over. Jersey Joe Walcott did a miserable job of handling the fight. He's a former heavyweight champion. In those days, they used anyone as a referee. It wasn't like a trained referee like today who could really know what he's doing. They just dug any fight up. Imagine today's fight between Anthony Joshua and Daniel Dubois. They use Alexander Usyk to referee. That would be the equivalent of it. It makes no sense.
Right.
But at that time, it actually did. And Nat Fleischer, the editor of Ring Magazine, who had tremendous power, told Walcott the fight's over. He's been down, and then Walcott stopped it. But you're right on that point. Ali himself asked one of his handlers after the fight, did he think it was legitimate? Because he did hit Liston, no doubt about that. And he did tell Liston to get up. So, but sometimes you could really hit a guy a good shot and knock him down and tell him to get up. I don't know what I would make out of that. Liston was rolling around the ring. He said later, the reason he was rolling around the ring the way he was because Ali was on top of him and you have to put one hand on the canvas to help yourself get up. And he was concerned Ali was going to hit him. I think Ali was inside Liston's head. That's the whole thing about it.
And Jack, I read there was suspicion that because Liston was in such debt that he actually bet on himself to lose.
That's totally unsubstantiated. I wouldn't pay attention. Those rumors, whatever. Totally unsubstantiated.
So
and Liston, wait, how much can you bet on yourself that would be worth more than being champion? You lose the title. Think of how much less money you're making. What you need to bet on yourself, you're heavyweight champion, you're making big money if that's the case.
It's a great point. I'm just telling you what was written and what the suspicions were. So and like I said, I want to do this because I wanted to ask you different questions that we never talked about before. Yeah. So he goes on to fight. I mean, he was I think he had 5 losses. I think it was 57-5. It's off the top of my head, Jack. I could be wrong.
56-5, yeah.
All right. So he goes on to fight Frazier. I've watched all 3 fights against Frazier. I know for a fact Frazier won the first fight. There's no doubt that the fight of the century. The second fight, Ali wins. But I think Frazier won that fight. I've watched that fight 5 times. I think Frazier outperforms Ali at the time. Power punches, and it was going back and forth. I think, in my opinion, that somebody else could say Ali won that one. The third fight with Frazier, I mean, they were going at it. Frazier runs out of steam in the fight at the end, and he lost the fight. There's no doubt he lost that fight. Ali came out at the end. He won that fight. I say that between Frazier and Norton, I think Norton won 2 of those fights. if those were scored that way, would Ali still be considered the greatest greatest heavyweight of all time by you?
Well, you're right about the first fight, the fight of the century. Yeah. I mean, but everyone gives Frazier's due. Everyone acknowledges Frazier won the fight. Even Ali, after the fight, started whining and complaining. You're not going to get a worse sportsman than Ali was after the first Frazier fight. I'm not one of these who's going to throw all these accolades. Ali was so wonderful. The term sore loser should have been attached to Ali's name after the first fight. He was a disgrace. The way he was claiming, "Oh, I won the fight. The judges robbed me," whining this and that, and it's. But the second fight, I think Ali legitimately won and got the decision. I mean, in that fight, the second fight, there were 5 close rounds. Ali won 5 rounds clearly. Frazier won 2 rounds clearly, and the other 5 are up for grabs. So
Right.
do what you want. If you want to give Frazier all 5 of those rounds, yeah, you could say he won the fight. But those were 5 coin flip rounds, basically. In the third fight, Frazier was retired on the stool at the end of the 14th round by his trainer, Eddie Futch. The heat was terrible in Manila, the heat and humidity. I think that did Frazier in at the end. Ali was able to withstand the conditions better than Frazier was. And you have that in all sports. Look, we have that in football. Some teams can withstand the cold better than other teams.
Right.
You might get a championship game to see who goes to the Super Bowl this year, and it could be in 8-degree weather. Who's going to be able to withstand the cold better? That might be more important than execution, even to a sense.
And that's a great point.
Yeah.
That's a great point too, Jack. So that brings me to conditions, heat. George Foreman. I mean, he fights Ali. George Foreman runs out of gas, basically. I mean, Ali's holding him like Ali. Listen, Ali was a master of the ring. I give him that. I mean, that guy, he would hold you. He hit you with flurries. I mean, no score points. I mean, he come off a hold, hit you with flurries, go back to holding you again. I mean, he was a master in the ring defensively. I don't think he gets enough credit for that. And, of course, holding, you're not supposed to do that. Frazier's camp complained about it constantly in the fourth fight, that Ali just kept tying him up, which the ref is supposed to break it up right away. And
the ref is Tony Perez, but also keep this in mind. Frazier wasn't working in the clinches. When Ali held him, he wasn't trying to punch. He was held a lot. Had he been trying to work and fight on the inside more, maybe there would have been more of an argument. But what a fighter's supposed to do. We heard that with Ricky Hatton when he fought Floyd Mayweather, that the referee kept breaking them. As soon as Hatton got inside, Mayweather would hold him, and the referee wouldn't let Hatton, according to him, fight on the inside.
Right.
But, if you grab a guy and you tie his arms up, I mean, what's the ref supposed to do? I'm not as critical of Tony Perez in the second Ali fight as, maybe some of the others have been.
Yeah. But you got to admit that Frazier and Foreman are power punchers. And when they throw punches, they're going to throw everything. Ali is more of a combination kind of guy. And I'm not putting away his power because he does have power, especially off the combinations. Yeah. But was the 2 fighters that depended on power against Ali. They're both in, and whether that's crazy, and it drains a power puncher, I think, more than a boxer. And again, if Ali fights Foreman again, which he didn't, and I don't care what the circumstances are, he didn't give Foreman another shot. And I think Foreman is probably a top 5, top 6 heavyweight too. If he fights Foreman again and beats Foreman again, I give Ali a lot more credit. I think, and we've talked about this before, I think he ducks Foreman. I think he's smart to duck Foreman.
I don't think he ducked Foreman because of the timeline, because after Foreman got stopped by Ali, the loss devastated him. And he really didn't do much for a year. It just didn't quite, sometimes fights don't quite line up. Ali could have fought Foreman, but it wasn't like Foreman was out there all by himself, hot on Ali's trail, where Ali had pressure to give him a rematch. Somehow it never got that close to rematch again. Well, Foreman really, how do I explain it? He fought 5 guys in one night after that. Ali went to Canada to see that. He kind of taunted Foreman, had fun. Then Foreman struggled, beat Ron Lyle. Then when Foreman was moving close to rematch, he lost to Jimmy Young, retired. It just didn't quite line up. So no, Ali didn't duck Foreman. He ducked the fourth Norton fight. But when you fought a guy 3 times before, you can't say he's completely ducked you, because he did fight Norton 3 times in his career.
So let's get to something we've never talked about. Ali's refusal to fight in Vietnam. All right. We've never touched on that. And because of politically, I don't like it, but I've got it, because if we're going to talk the Ali story, Cassius Clay Ali story, we got to talk about this. So at that time in history, we know, we just came out of World War II into Korea, into Vietnam. Korea was my uncle was fought in Korea and in Vietnam, to be honest. And I, of course, I've talked to him. I'm a fellow serviceman. Korea was considered a war. Vietnam at the beginning was considered a conflict. It wasn't called the Vietnam War at the time. It was called the Vietnam conflict. So Ali refuses to, he's fighting. He refuses to go to Vietnam as a conscientious objector because of religion. And at that time, according to Jewish religion, the Catholic Christian religion, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not murder is also part of our religious beliefs too. But the United States would go to defend its allies. South Korea was an ally. South Vietnam was an ally. Kennedy at the time sent Marines over there. It escalated, blah, blah, blah. But in 1967, when he does this, they go to arrest him. He gets out on appeal. At that time, he was with the Muslim, it was a different Muslim group he was part of. And they got him out on appeal, which most people would have ended up in jail because they didn't have that type of backing. You either went to jail or you went to Canada. That was your choices. A lot of people went to Canada to avoid the Vietnam War. So because of his popularity, because there's people behind him, and of course they actually had I think it's called the Cleveland Convention, where Jim Brown, Bill Russell, and I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, Lou Alcindor, which became Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, back him. Again, 3 very popular, very influential people in the Black community and the sports period. I mean, these are some of the all-time greats in sports. So they're backing him. Ali starts talking about racial inequality. Why would I go to Vietnam and get drop bombs when I'm being put down here in America? Now, the Vietnam veterans were treated terrible when they came home. I'm not going to blame people like Ali or people that associate with Ali for this, but they did add to it, and they were spit on. They were called baby killers, blah blah blah. We think they're great. We give them all these awards and stuff. Jane Fonda was also part of that Vietnam thing that happened over there because of her popularity. And some people, in fact, one of my relatives stayed in Germany. He wouldn't come home because of the way the Vietnam vets were treated, as opposed to a lot of sports legends that went to World War II to support our allies, that went to Korea to support allies. They were treated as heroes. The Vietnam vets weren't. And today we go to Afghanistan. The veterans come. The people come back. That's not really a war that we're in to win. Just like we weren't in to win Korea and Vietnam. So, but they're treated like heroes. My question to you and James both. I'm not going to say is it fair, but don't you think Ali got a differential of treatment because the Muslim were around him and could afford to get him out on bail, and because of the other popular sports personalities coming to and backing him in this? Do you think that he got preferential treatment, and do you think it was fair that Ali was able to be out on appeal and a lot of people couldn't, and a lot of Black people died in Vietnam?
No, everyone was allowed to be out on bail who didn't go into the service. I don't think if everyone was entitled to have a trial later on. I don't think being out on bail was the issue.
You had to be able to afford bail, Jack. You had to be able to afford whatever bail was set. You had to be able to afford that. So some people know not everybody did get out on bail.
Yeah, I mean, going into the service would have been a terrible fit for Ali because Ali's personality never allowed him to take orders from someone. That's why his first trainer, Joe Martin, who I mentioned, the police officer, who was a no-nonsense guy who'd give orders, didn't hit it off with Ali. Angelo Dundee got along great with Ali because he was easygoing. He let Ali more or less be boss. And he tried to get his point across to Ali, in a roundabout way. Like if he wanted him to throw a jab a certain way, he says, wow, you look so great when you bend your knee, when you throw that jab. That's beautiful. He didn't tell him to bend his knee, put the idea in his head, to try to get results that way. And Ali, by nature, his mother was a very gentle woman, extremely, extremely gentle. It wasn't in Ali's personality to actually shoot someone. Ali was a great humanitarian. What it means great, don't get me wrong.
Okay, that's all great. There's a lot of people that never shot anybody and that don't like taking orders. I was one of them when I went in the service. I mean, there's a lot of people like that. That's not the question.
Okay.
The question
what is the question?
The question is, do you think that it's fair that Ali got out because of backing and because he was popular? And that he didn't have to go and
it was unfair to Ali. Let me tell you the difference between the average person. If they were out on bail, they would be allowed to work on their job in the meantime.
If
most people are out on bail.
I don't know about that, Jack. I don't know about that. First, again, you had to afford bail, which most people that were put in the service, let's face it, if they don't have anybody there, they get out of going into the service, right? Most people that have money don't go into service, right? Go ahead, James.
All right, so I want to say that I think it was unfair. I agree with Jack. The reason why I say that is because I think Ali, he was initially Cassius Clay, but he obviously joined the Nation of Islam, which is what you were alluding to, and he became Muhammad Ali. So he became a little more conscious. So I think part of this was him being conscientious about what was going on, not in Vietnam, but what was going on in the United States, what was going on. I'm not saying he's totally political. I mean, obviously he's still a human being and he obviously wanted to do what he did, but he gave up. Didn't he give up his belt? From what I understand?
James, you know what Ali was concerned about? Ali. He wasn't a public advocate. He wasn't a anti-war advocate. If you need evidence, the Vietnam War was still going on when Ali's case was resolved, and he was in the clear to talk out against the war, never said a word, never got involved as a societal public figure at all. Ali wasn't, of course, Ali would talk about certain things, the way the black man was treated in the United States, but it was in relation to himself, always his case. Why should I go fight for you? You won't fight for my rights here as a black man.
Right.
But Ali never took a stand outside of Ali. If it had nothing to do with Ali, you didn't see him at the forefront marching or taking any stand on issues, which is his right. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
Which is his right. And as far as Ali was hailed as a hero by all people, look what he risked. He risked 5 years in jail, giving up his title. What about the guys who went to fight in the war because they did that based on principle? They were risking more than Ali was in reality. Right. They were risking a lot more without getting the accolades. They were no names. They got no glory what they were doing. If anything, they got grief when they came back to the United States. And they were doing it based on their principles. Look, I respect what Ali did. I respect what he did. I supported his right to, appeal, not going to service, if he's basing it on religious grounds, which I'm not questioning moral beliefs. That's a better way of putting it. I never served in the service, so I have no right to talk as much as someone like Mac, who actually did time in the service. Their feelings count for a lot more than mine do. But I don't want to, and Ali himself didn't want to be hailed as some type of hero. Later on, they told him he had a civil suit against the government. He said, look, they were doing what they thought was right. I was doing what I thought was right. I don't want to pursue this anymore. And I give Ali a lot of credit for that.
And that's a lot of great points that you made, Jack. And that's why I want to talk about this. Because there are a lot of people, especially in the service at the time, were really ticked off at Muhammad Ali and that he got away with not going when their sons and brothers and nephews and husbands had to go. Yes. So remember, there was a draft then. It wasn't a sign up thing. It wasn't, you can do it if you want. And we're going to give you benefits. That's not what it was. You were going, or you were going to Canada, or, you were going to jail. And that was your choices back then.
But I think I think the issue is that I agree with what you're saying about Muhammad Ali, but at least he was in his presence was in the forefront to just acknowledge what was going on with Black people here in the United States, having to go serve and then come back and still have to come back to segregation and not being able to vote. So it at least acknowledges that. I'm not saying Ali was
wait. Not to be able to do what? Not to be able to do what?
To vote. You didn't even have the right to vote. So, a lot of that was, up to that point, up to 65, the Voting Rights Act.
Well, so 67 is
no, which is a good point, because this country was so messed up. There was a running back in the Packers, Travis, was it Henry or whatever his last name was? He had a great game for the Packers. They're like carrying him off the field. Then he tries to get a haircut in Green Bay, and they don't let him get one immediately.
And it's true. And that's, again, this is sports mixed with politics, mixed with social things. But to tell the Muhammad Ali story, we have to bring up these things and talk about it, because it really was a huge deal. There were people that were ticked that he didn't go to war, which is kind of crazy, right? But if you think about it, when generations before him had to go to war, they had no choice. There was no, you could appeal, whatever you want to appeal, you're going to war. But Vietnam at that time, folks, was not a war. There wasn't classified a war. It was classified a conflict. And we didn't fight to win that war, just like Korea. And this is when all this nonsense started about going to war and not wanting to win. And I'll tell you, I read a lot of military history and a lot about wars when I was in the service. All we had to do was blow up a bridge, and that war was, blow up a dam, and Vietnam was done. But they would have killed a lot of innocent people, so they didn't do it. So a lot of Americans died instead. And if it was a real war, the dam would have been blown up, folks. So, and again, this is what kind of why.
But Ali was also told by military personnel that they were going to utilize him where he had the most value. In other words, the way they utilized Joe Louis in World War II, he would box exhibitions.
Exactly.
He'd go to the different military bases. He would be like an entertainer going all over. There were no guarantees that would be the case, but it was hard to imagine Ali being sent out to the battlefield unless he was so despised by the generals who wouldn't have minded getting him knocked off.
I think and it's a great thing you bring up Joe Louis, because that's what happened. They went to war and they did end up boxing in exhibitions. And I agree with you, Jack. I think that's where he would have been utilized. So with that, let me give you my top 5 fighters of all time. And this is, of course, era by era, because boxing's changed over the years. So I got to say Joe Louis is number 1 of all time. That would be my pick. They never fought each other. I think Joe Louis would have beat Muhammad Ali both in their prime. Jack Dempsey would have gave Ali a hell of a fight. I love Dempsey. I love what he represented all the way up to Joe Louis. I don't know if he's a better fighter than Ali. I don't know who would have won it. I think it would have been close. Maybe Ali would have edged him, but I'm going to go with Jack Dempsey. Number 3, of course, Muhammad Ali. Number 4, I'm going with Lennox Lewis, Jack. You guys do a lot of, make-believe fights. I don't know if Ali could have handled Lennox Lewis in his prime and Lewis in his prime. I don't know. Lennox
Ali
Lewis.
was Lewis's idol, Lennox
Yes.
Lewis.
Yes.
Yeah.
Number 5, I got to give it to George Foreman. His only major loss was to Muhammad Ali. And if he didn't lose to Muhammad Ali, he might be considered maybe top 3 of all time. So that's my top 5, Jack.
Okay, I never really sat down and did a list. I shouldn't say that. I did a pound for pound list years ago, and it's stored away somewhere. And without looking at it, I'd probably have a different list if I did it all over again. Like, it's so subjective.
Yes.
I kind of like to look at accomplishments, what the fighters have done in their era. And their eras have been a little different. In some eras you fight less than in others. And it depends the type of fighters who are available for champions to go up against. If you don't have the right opponents, if you don't have great opponents, it's going to hurt your standings, as far as how great you're actually going to be. It's not like team sports. A baseball team could win 130 games, and all of a sudden they're going to be considered the greatest ever, even if there's expansion and a lot of weak teams, because you're going to look at a number.
Right.
But somehow in boxing, it's numbers aren't as important.
I agree. And James, do you have a top 5? We'll talk about the Raiders and Madden next week. Do you have a top 5 boxers of all fighters of all time?
There's so many guys. Like you guys said, era. I mean, I'm 49, so the 90s, 80s, and 90s was my era, and so, man, I like Marvin Hagler. He's one of my favorite fighters to watch.
Top 5 heavyweights.
Oh, heavyweights. I'm gonna say, I'll be honest with you, just because of the history. I mean, I will put him in the top 5. I'm not gonna say the number. I don't know. You mix the number up, but I like Jack Johnson. I like Mike Tyson, Muhammad Ali, and I'd say George Foreman as well.
Now, you mentioned a point when you said Jack Johnson. One of the things with Ali, he's been given a pass that other fighters haven't been given. We keep hearing, he was out of the ring for over 3 years against Joe Frazier. Had he not had that layoff, he would have beaten Frazier easy. Ali was 29 when he met Frazier. He had 2 warm-up fights. Give me a break. I don't want to hear that. And yet we hear how magnificent Jack Johnson was, because he beat a 35-year-old Jim Jeffries who hadn't fought in 6 years. That was his great White Hope victory. Against Jim Jeffries hadn't boxed in 6 years and was age 35, which was considered ancient at the time. So Johnson stops Jeffries, and we're hearing, how magnificent he is. So we give Johnson full credit for that, but take credit away from Joe Frazier, because Ali, who was 6 years younger than Jeffries, not 2 warm-up fights, and would later regain the title as is. Come on.
So there you go. So I hope you guys enjoyed the show again. We talked about the Miracle Mets, Tom Seaver, one of the greatest pitchers of all time. And we also talked about, at least, in the top 3, in my opinion anyway, greatest heavyweights in the history of boxing, Muhammad Ali, who to me, what made him different than everybody else wasn't his dancing, wasn't his combinations, it was the ring. The man could bring you down the ring any way he wanted, and most people fell for it. And man, that guy was unbelievable inside a ring, whether it was defensive tactics, whether it was it getting in your head, whatever it was. This guy was magnificent at it, and he is head and shoulders above, I think, any other champion in history when it comes to that anyway. So thanks for joining us today, folks. Tomorrow is a big football show, 8 a.m. Eastern on YouTube, 4 p.m. Eastern on Roku. We got a heck of a lineup coming for you. Thanks for joining us. We always enjoy going over the sports memories. Next week, we'll have something different for you, folks. Have a great Saturday. If you're going out, stay out of trouble.